Welcome to this month's Creation Justice webinar, a gathering place for building a faith rooted and faith sustained movement addressing many of the critical issues of our time. I'm Brooks Barrett, the Environmental Justice Minister for the United Church of Christ. I'm joined by my co host, the Reverend Michael Malcolm, who is the Executive Director for the People's Justice Council and Alabama Interfaith Power and Light. Michael, great to have you joining us from Ethiopia today. As we get started, I want to play around with this image of a bubble. In the news, there's a lot of talk about an AI bubble for investors. This week, a piece in the Atlantic was entitled, Just How Bad Would an AI Bubble Be? While The Economist had an article entitled, What if the AI stock market blows up? So there are investor bubbles, but then in everyday language, we talk about other bubbles, bubbles of excitement. To an AI enthusiast, one might say, I don't want to burst your bubble, but AI creates some serious environmental harms. And then there are the bubbles in which people exist in isolation from everyone else. Some of us might live in political bubbles where we're not interacting with people who hold contrary perspectives. So, Michael, what is bubbling up for you today as we talk about AI from a justice perspective?
Yeah, thank you, Brooks. When I think of a bubble or think of bubbles, especially in relation to our economy and societal structure, I quickly come to a realization that bubbles burst. Usually, when bubbles burst, it negatively impacts those of us who are on the outside of that bubble. This, for instance, the stock market crash that sent us into a Great Depression was an example of a bubble bursting. The housing crisis that left many without homes and investment was an example of a bubble bursting. When these bubbles burst, it devastates many of our most vulnerable. The bubbles were very deceptive. I mean, they were shiny and attractive, and some of it was even fun for some. However, these bubbles contain corruption and harm. When these bubbles burst, they left destruction. Today, we are facing yet another bubble. This AI bubble presents it as user friendly and presents as fun. However, the potential ecological destruction that is contained within and the community harm that is contained within this bubble is not one that would be so easy for us to recover from. In fact, I would even go to say it may be impossible for us to recover from it. Today, we have assembled a panel of experts who have studied and see the potential harms of this bubble. And I look forward to hearing their presentations, as well as look forward to ways that we can get involved to combat the harm that this bubble is guaranteed to bring with it. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Terrific, Michael. Thank you so much for setting the stage for us. Let me now introduce our panelists in the order in which they'll be speaking. First up, we have Naira Sharif, who is the director of Flint Rising, an environmental justice organization based in Flint, Michigan. They have worked on a variety of drinking water policy issues for over 10 years. They have organized many state and national campaigns around the EPA's lead and copper rule and drinking water infrastructure. Next up, we'll have with us Lindsay Harper, who is the national coordinator of Arm in Arm for People's Justice Council. Lindsay began her work in the environmental, economic, and social justice spheres in 2013 with the launch of the global initiative Green Going Forward. In 2018, she became the executive director for Georgia Wand Women's Action for New Directions. Then we have with us today Anthony Carifa Rogers Wright, who is a proud and active member of the Black Alliance for Peace and the Movement for Black Lives. He has worked in a variety of capacities as a climate and environmental liberation advocate, a racial justice practitioner, a writer, and a policy expert. His radio program Full Spectrum with Anthony Rogers Wright airs on the mighty WPFW network every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And then finally, today we have with us Wanda Mosley, who currently serves as the Deputy Policy Director for Black Voters Matter, where she oversees work on a number of critical issues, including environmental and climate justice concerns. She began with Black Voters Matter after historically successful efforts in Georgia around the 2020 presidential election and the 2021 U.S. Senate runoff races. Naira, we'll start with you. Let you take it over.
Thank you. And thank you, Reverend Malcolm, for inviting me to this mighty and powerful panel. I'm the director of Flint Rising, which is based in Flint, Michigan, and we formed in the aftermath of the Flint water crisis, and after it made international news. But long before I was like in these nonprofit streets, I was a programmer, a software engineer, that I worked mostly like designing and industrial systems for production for multiple companies. And I just want to do like some level setting. Like one, like data centers are basically a collection of servers that are used for computation. Like way back in the day, we would call it cloud computing. But that's basically anything that is not like actually like on your physical device. Um, and like we're like all data centers aren't used for AI or artificial intelligence, but all AI uses data centers. And even calling it AI or artificial intelligence is a misnomer. Like actually what it is like there is no knowledge generation like when you're calling it like intelligence, basically curating information that's already existing. It's not generating new knowledge. They so like OpenAI, which are like a lot of the stuff like the Chat GPTs and the Geminis or like whatever Gork, like all the stuff, like it's all using kind of like the same like large language model, which is basically like taking existing information. I don't know, like folks know what the cesspool of the internet is, but there's a lot of inaccurate stuff out there. And I just wanted to like frame it like that of like one, like this isn't something that, folks have been clamoring and needing, but yet in the last 5 years, like this has definitely permeated the national consciousness. And I just wanted to talk very briefly about like some of the like the water impacts, the impacts it has on water and water systems. One, like, because these are basically like giant buildings that are housing computational components. The temperature really needs to be set like really within a very close range. Like, so if folks have like gaming computers, you have like those big cooling fans. Just imagine that by 1,000%. Um, and like this can't be any old type of water. So this has to be, in many ways. And what's happening is like this is from existing drinking water systems that's being diverted um, to power like these data centers, and this is used like directly and indirectly. So directly in the actual like evaporation cooling systems, and then just indirectly when it comes to like the electrical generation. And this vastly depending on the energy source, like you may need more water, especially like when the source of electrical generation is fossil fuels. And like what we see that's happening, one, that this is kicking the can down the road when it comes to a just transition. In Michigan, like we have um a coal power plant that was set to be retired, and now that has been postponed. And we also have a nuclear power plant that is coming online after being decommissioned, the Palisades nuclear power plant. It's the first ever. And now there's another one in Iowa that is coming online after being decommissioned. And there's a 2024 report from the Lawrence Berkeley Institute that says that data centers are estimated to consume 17 billion gallons of drinking water. And like once water goes for cooling for data centers and for generating like power, especially for fossil fuels, that water cannot go back to the watershed. Like it's just done, you know. And one of the other things that is also happening, you know, like is like this lack of transparency when it comes to where these sites are going to be placed, because a lot of this information is happening behind closed doors. There is like no right to know legislation of like how much electricity that these places are going to consume, how much water is going to be needed to be diverted from these communities for the data centers. But I'll close out by saying that you know, like this is perpetuating sacrifice zones and hardening like those zones, basically building walls around those zones, because like we're being sacrificed for industry once again. We're being sacrificed for corporations. We're being sacrificed for venture capitalists who are having extreme FOMO right now because they just want to be like the one that's on board for the next big thing. I started off my career like basically at the very top of like in the early 2000s, like the dot com bubble, and that burst, and that like left a lot of engineers, you know, like out of a job, and it kind of pushed me out of the field because I didn't have like the you know, I didn't have like the you know, like the seniority to remain. So like once again, we don't want our communities to be sacrificed once again for industry. And I'll close there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Naira. And up next, we have with us Lindsay. Lindsay, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thank you, Brooks, and thank you, everyone. I'm glad to be here. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. So, hello, everyone. My name is Lindsay Harper. Naira, it was really great to hear what you were sharing, and you have a beautiful name, by the way. But I really appreciate you talking about the basic philosophy behind what's driving the data centers, what's driving dirty energy in general, what's driving usage of energy. I think those are the issues that connect so much of the work that we're doing. My name is Lindsay Harper. I'm National Coordinator of Arm in Arm, which is a project of the People's Justice Council. I'm happy to be able to be working with Reverend Michael Malcolm and multiple other partners across the Southeast and other parts of the country as well, and thinking about how we can work together in pushing back against data centers, which are popping up all over the country, and it's happening so fast, and there's still a lot of learning that's happening while people are having to respond at the same time. That's a lot of what I'm hearing in some of the rooms, is that there isn't necessarily a precedent for what's happening right now. So really leaning into like the expertise of folks who have been doing this work for a long time, who are also kind of learning on the cusp as things are happening. Policies are already happening. Policy changes are already happening. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I know that there have already been changes that have happened as far as, changes in the projection as to how much energy use is going to be needed based on the projections of usage of data centers, cryptocurrency, and AI and those things. And those projections have real consequences. Again, going back to this idea around how much dirty energy is needed, how much energy is needed based on, companies, big companies, the government that also supports this idea that AI is the greatest thing to ever happen. It will take over the world. It will take all of the jobs. It is the most important thing to ever happen, and everything will change. Well, that is one way of thinking, but there are other ways of thinking about it as well. I mean, I have seen articles, and I'm sure folks on this call have seen them as well, that, the AI implementation, companies that buy the AI haven't necessarily figured out how to best make it actually work for them. whole staffs have been fired to implement AI, but then a lot of those folks have had to be hired back because you can't just replace people with an AI that's learning. Yes, we've had multiple iterations of the AI, but it's still very new. And so I think what's really important as we're thinking about dirty energy and this projected usage and the profits, of course, you can't forget the shareholders and companies such as the Southern Company, which is very much in focus on shareholder profits and building dirty energy infrastructure to keep increasing those profits every year. It's really important that we continue to talk about what the real impacts of land and water and people. And I appreciate what you were saying earlier, Naira. The amount of land and water that's going to companies versus people, as I understand, it's like double digits. Well, like 17, 18, 19 empty dwellings per unhoused person in this country. We're throwing out food. We're using the little bit of clean water that we do have to fuel dirty energy like nuclear small modular reactors. It's all kinds of things, right? So, I mean, if you're thinking about when the time comes when there will be a drought, there will be unfortunately, based on the limited resources that are available to us now and the trends of how things are going, there will come a point where unfortunately the government may choose that the companies need the land and the water more than the people do. Right. I mean, I've heard this in the conversations of the subject matter experts in this space as well. The governments have already chosen industry over community based on the laws that are already passed that allow a certain amount of contamination, that allows this many businesses in an area, allow, communities to be exposed to certain things. Well, that will continue, especially when you have all of this projected economic boost coming from AI centers. So in thinking about that, we really have to be conscious about the philosophy behind land and water use, especially if we're even more so putting profits over people. We're putting machines over people. And that's a scary, scary thing to think about. I do want to mention that, as I mentioned to you, I'm from Atlanta, also working across Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. Through the Power for Southern People, Not Southern Company campaign. And through that, I'm learning, I mentioned to you the data centers that are cropping up in Atlanta and in Georgia. I'm also learning about their data centers. There's one coming up in Bessemer, Alabama. They're talking about it being the size of like 18 super Walmarts. Like, that's insane. That's insane when you think about, well, how big is one super Walmart? And you're going to put 18 of those things together. And how much land is that? How much water is that, right? Again, and I saw an article the other day. People saying like please and thank you to AI is costing like, millions of dollars. And so we got to take a step back and think about what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what we're using it for, because technology and AI can't solve everything. So minus AI, the Minus AI campaign is one coming out of the People's Justice Council. You will be hearing more about it. The idea is right now, you basically don't have a choice. When you go into your search engine, you have to use AI. You have to, at this point, kind of opt out versus it automatically opts you in. And so the idea is we have to change that. So much extra usage on the AI, which actually isn't really needed, is using more energy, water, and land than is actually needed. And so the Minus AI campaign is to help educate folks about that and begin moving folks' minds and understanding that we can do a lot just by opting out of using AI in our search engines. It can be something so simple, but that can have an enormous, enormous impact. And the idea is, bringing together people who use our search engines, also understanding that there are businesses who are maybe not getting their ads seen on Google because of the AI, right? People are saying the social media is changing. You're not getting to people like you used to, right? So we gotta be mindful about how we are engaging with AI, and so we're not kind of fueling the flames. And it's something that may or may not, and doesn't necessarily have to pan out the way the big businesses say that it will. So ultimately, what we're hoping for and moving for is policy that makes it so that you have to opt in to AI versus having to opt out. So you will be hearing more about that. It's under development. We'll be working across states, across partners to move this. So again, my name is Lindsay Harper, and I'm happy to be here with you this afternoon. And I'm happy to answer questions when that time comes. Brooks, I'll pass it back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Lindsay. And we will move now to Anthony. Anthony, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much. And thanks to Lindsay and Nayyirah. I'm sorry, my voice is a little messed up. I'm here in Ethiopia with Rev and I'm fighting a little bit of a bug, but there was no way I was going to miss this, especially because Rev is here and he wouldn't let me miss it anyway, physically. But, first and foremost, I hope people understand that it's very appropriate that United Church of Christ is holding this webinar and leading on this issue, right? And this is the formation that gave us the landmark Toxic Waste and Race in the United States of America, which still is germane now as it was in 1987. And it's probably time for another Toxic Waste and Race moment. This was the document that even, all the some leftists who like to say, "Oh no, it's not race, it's class." Toxic waste and race was like, "Nope, it's definitely race. it's all racism, and we have the statistical analysis to prove it. So put that in your class reductionist pipe and smoke it." But that said, I'm wondering if I can share my screen because those who know me, I like to do PowerPoint presentations, and plus I think that my PowerPoint is probably much better to look at than I am right now with me fighting a cold. So let's go. There it is. And we'll play from the start. So, I mean, I think first and foremost, just to get started, it's just like Nayyirah and Lindsay said, AI and data centers represent the new Frankenstein of environmental racism and white supremacy efficiency. And I say white supremacy efficiency, and we'll dig into how AI works. AI, of course, works on large language models, large language models coming from a society that is already white supremacy is already ensconced in said society. So AI is essentially allowing for the most efficient proliferation of white supremacy ideology. And that, of course, includes patriarchy, bigotry, all forms of oppression. And that's, kind of where this is coming from. Just some key themes and proposals for us to think about. AI and data centers first need to be bifurcated in order for them to be properly and accurately conflated. And let me explain what I mean by that. The opt-out initiative that my dear sister Lindsay and Rev have initiated is extremely, extremely important. But we also have to understand that when we're asking people about AI, it is a personal choice, right? And as time and time is proven again in our very capitalist society, we just have a hard time giving things up. Right? We can't give up fossil fuels, even though we know how bad fossil fuels are. And this is just my personal opinion. We know how bad and the Democrat Party has been for Black people. Black people still vote for them and things like that. So we just have to really think about that because, we know that when we prove and even show people and demonstrate to people what AI is doing, not just to our natural resources through data centers, which I'll get to in a moment, but just to, as Lindsay was saying, how we interact with each other, how we think about things and our creativity. Rev and I are here in Africa right now where AI is being pushed as a climate solution. People are still going to use ChatGPT. So how do we appeal to folk in that sense when we're talking about AI? We're at the United Church of Christ. What we also need is a collective maximum morality pitch because that is what's really driving the many externalities that comes with using AI. Data center is a lot easier, right? I mean, you've just heard from two people who know better than anyone. My dear comrade Nayyirah lives in a Black city next to another Black city that sits on a Great Lake that represents 20 to 24% of the world's remaining fresh surface water, right? As a matter of fact, the blackest cities in America north of the Mason-Dixon all sit on a Great Lake: Buffalo, Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago, Milwaukee. And so we know that data centers will have just tragic impacts if they're allowed to proliferate in the Great Lakes region. So AI is the what, and data centers are the how, right? Data centers allow AI to keep going, and we'll talk about that a bit more. As I said, AI is both a set of personal choices and decisions made by nation states, right? We keep hearing one of the main arguments, oh, we have to defeat the People's Republic of China and the AI race, et cetera, et cetera. And corporations, of course, love that argument because it allows them, as we were talking about with this bubble. We have seen this before, all kinds of money, taxpayer money, especially just being thrown at them at a time when the economy is asking itself, what in the world is going on? And we know that we have entered the phase of what many like to call late-stage capitalism. Now, we also have to talk about the militarization aspect of it, okay? Where these data centers are popping up in communities that are already heavily policed. Let's talk about cop cities. We're going to get to that more in a moment as well. But AI using the militarized forces, in our case, domestic militarized forces, whether they be the police or ICE or the National Guard or all other federal agencies, they're being employed by these corporations and nation states to increase surveillance and control of oppressed people and other beneficiaries of capitalism. So that's sort of three key themes. Next, now we're making the connections, right? We've got to make the connections of what this is all that we're talking about. And you've heard that already from our two previous brilliant speakers. Data centers are a profligate resource extraction and consumption, just an insane amount of energy, more energy than entire cities. And of course, the water situation. Even affluent white people are turning their faucets on in some communities in Georgia and not being able to get water out of it because data centers are sucking up all of it before they can utilize it. We talked about the emissions. Just at a time where we're probably going to blow, no, we are going to blow past the 1.5 degrees centigrade or Celsius threshold that was set by the Paris Climate Agreement. We won't talk about that, but and we don't need more emissions right now, but we know that that's already happening. The externalities also that come with those emissions, more health impacts and whatnot. We don't know when the next pandemic is going to come, but we do know that Black, Brown, Indigenous, and poor white folk are going to be the people who are hurt most by anything that attacks the respiratory system. And then there's the idea of scarcity, increased high energy burden. These data centers bring rate hikes. I happen to live in Nebraska, the only state with 100% public power, but they're making private deals with data centers right now. We are about to have our third rate hike in 1 year to accommodate the proliferation of data centers. High energy burden in places that do not ban shutoffs is very, very dangerous, especially for our folk who have already been afflicted with health impairments because of where our communities have been situated. If our energy gets shut off, we can't run our defibrillators, we can't run our oxygen tanks, we can't run our dialysis machines, we can't live, we can't eat, and it puts us in an even more vulnerable position because when they do those rate hikes, they're not going to be thinking about the people who are already experiencing high energy burden. And then the third connection, as I mentioned earlier, militarism and increased surveillance and control of oppressed communities. The Zionist ethno-state genocide that's going on right now. Most of the people being slaughtered in Palestine. It's AI. It's facial recognition and just blowing people up indiscriminately. We already know. Going back to efficient white supremacy, that in the United States, Black people are already being disproportionately impacted by facial recognition, I guess, really accentuating the myth that we all look alike. Then we have to draw the connections with the cop cities that are proliferating. Big up to the ruling that Nayura just sent to us earlier. It's not over, but it does look like the judge has thrown out some of the RICO charges against our comrades who are fighting against the cop city in Atlanta. But these cop cities are proliferating everywhere, right? Not just in the great state of Georgia with a decent college football team. And then I just had to bring it up because Rev and I are here now. AFRICOM, which is Africa Central Command of the United States of America, will be acting as a vanguard for the necessary natural resources, water, land, for AI and data centers, right? And as a matter of fact, we have a situation right now where some of the pushers of AI and data center technology right here at the Africa Climate Summit welcome the presence of AFRICOM, because they know that AFRICOM will basically allow them to do whatever it is that they want to do to protect those natural resources, just like we saw with another militarized force in the Middle East not too long ago during the Iraq war, we want to call it that. So In terms of emerging strategies, and I'll stop here and then we'll come back to it because we do want to talk about solutions, as our dear sister Lindsay just did. This is a 5-point approach that the Black Alliance for Peace recently came out with on our approach to climate, environment, and militarism. But develop our work through the campaign demand of expose and confront the climate and environmental war on our peoples and our lands. We want to make the connections of climate and environmental liberation with the priority campaign demand and economic warfare on our people and neighborhoods. And when we say defend Black people, we're not just talking about Black people. We don't get down like that. Poor white folk are our people as well. Rev and I have been to Appalachia plenty of times, Gulf South, wherever it is. We just happen to know that the protection of poor white folk necessitates the liberation of Black folk and all other oppressed folk as well. Third, we have to dismantle this militarized infrastructure and US-led imperialism in the United States and abroad, US, EU, NATO, axis of domination, COP cities, US military bases all around the world, including ones that almost got bombed in Qatar, I said Zionist ethno-state. We got to mobilize, catalyze our self-defense coalitions. We do have a right to defend ourselves. We do have a right to defend our communities pursuant to international law and human rights law. And that brings me to the 5th point, is to fight and realize a people-centered human rights initiative, not a liberal human rights initiative that gets pushed by certain organizations that I won't name here, but people-centered human rights. The climate crisis, first and foremost, is a human rights issue, right? The emissions and all that other stuff are symptoms of the larger disease of white supremacy ideology, patriarchy, and colonization. And that's the silver lining of AI and data centers. It elucidates the root causes of the climate crisis in ways that are simply irrefutable. And then just for my last slide, because one of my policy leads, that being Nahira's on the call, I would be remiss if I didn't lift up our amazing and beautiful and blessed Black Climate Mandate, which also has many, many strategies in the realm of climate crisis, health, land, water, energy, labor, economy, democracy, and diasporic solidarity as a means to fight these things and emerge victorious. And I'll stop there. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much, Anthony. And now we'll turn to our last but not least speaker, Wanda. Thank you for being with us, Wanda.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. Thank you for putting this together. Strangely enough, I'm going to say thank you for making me go last because this is a firehouse panel. These people are amazing. They are brilliant. They are literally my go-tos for information because at the end of the day, I'm a community organizer. I learn all this stuff from them, and then I need to synthesize, boil it down, and take it to the people. So what I want to talk about today are some of the fights that we are having on the local level with regards to data centers. So if we think about our cities and how cities are governed, how cities are put together, what mandates a city, one of the things I want to focus on are comprehensive plans. For most of our cities, data centers weren't a thing 10, 8, 7, 6, even 5 years ago, so it's not in the comprehensive plan. So that necessitates changing of ordinances. And that happens at city council meetings, which, you could hide a bag of gold in most city council chambers and no one would find it because people just don't go. They just don't go. But for this particular issue, people have to be plugged in. Not only city council, but looking at whatever governing body holds information with regards to rezoning in your city or your county, because that's the first step. That's the first hint that something is coming and it's not going to be good. So for example, if you are in a good relationship with your city council rep, your county commissioner, someone from your development board, they have the tea. They have all the information. And if they're willing to share it with you, then you got a chance to stop this thing. You have a chance to organize yourself, your neighbors, your community, and get ahead of this. And so with regards to these ordinance changes, they're going to happen at city council meetings. The organizing is very, very important. I'm happy to share some data center toolkits that I have when I'm done speaking that, offer some information. And so when you have folks come together, when you are going to these planning and zoning meetings, which happen first, right, before the rezoning actually happens with city council and mayor. The planning and zoning meetings are amazing. There are no elected officials there. There's usually just some staff there, and you can just go hog wild up in there. Ask all the questions, be all kinds of mad. Let that employer know to send that information to county zoning, to elected officials, that people are hot. The last planning and zoning meeting I attended regarding a data center, the staff employee said, wow, there were only 3 people at the last meeting. And I said, yeah, and let that be the first shot fired, that we see you and we know what you're doing and we're not going to sit quiet. So organizing people to come there, that is the key to get your people together and get the information and get it out to the community. Now, in terms of fighting against data centers, my colleagues mentioned a lot of the issues that are of grave concern: land use, water, electricity. You will actually absolutely see an increase in your electricity bills. You will absolutely see an increase in your water bills, which is ironic here in the state of Georgia, who have been in fights against water. Look it up. It's called the Tri-State Water Wars. It has a name because it started in the 90s between Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. Literally, the Supreme Court had to step in. And so when I'm speaking at these meetings, the first thing I talk about is, how is it that y'all don't remember we stay near or in a drought in Georgia pretty much every other year-ish? The only thing that brings us out of those droughts are named storms. How sad and frustrating is that? We were that close to being in a drought last year until Hurricane Helene came through and replenished all the water. And so I think in some ways, elected officials are in some kind of, I don't know, la land, where they just refuse to believe or acknowledge we still have issues with water. And yet we're going to let these behemoths come that use millions and millions and millions and millions of gallons of water every day to cool the generators that are fossil fuels are involved in all this. None of the good things. Another grave concern about the data centers, the noise pollution. And I don't think people talk about that enough. You can go and find firsthand accounts from people who live in Illinois, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas. There are some people who are literally getting sick because of that constant humming. It releases some type of hormones that cause what do we call it when we get high blood pressure, things like that. So all of this information has to be synthesized and shared with your elected officials, because what we found is that they don't know any of this stuff, or if they do know, some of them just don't care. Now, to be clear, local elected officials are charged with raising money, economic development, right, to have money to run cities. But the message to them has to be, if you keep letting these types of things infiltrate our cities and be right next to our homes and our schools, you won't have a city to run in a few decades. It just won't be here. These areas where we live will not be livable. What are we going to do for water? What are we going to do for land? How are we going to have green spaces to go outside and be healthy and absorb vitamin D? It's not going to happen. It's not going to be here. So when we get in those fights, these are the types of information that we need to share in written form. I have emailed mayor and council all the information I have about data centers. And if and when there comes a time for a vote to happen, you have to be very clear in telling them what it is that you want. Now, we are struggling in terms of getting elected officials to listen. There have been some wins. There was a win down in Middle Georgia in what we call in Monroe County, where they were able to stop the rezoning request of 900 acres to create a data center campus. Unfortunately, within a week, that particular developer went to the county next door, Lamar, and that's where we're planning to build their data center. So this moment calls for organizing across city, county, and in some place state lines. We have got to be in touch with our neighbors to let them know, if it doesn't pass here, it's coming to you. Whatever mechanism you use to create these connections, please employ them immediately. Facebook, ironically, has been a good place to find all kinds of coalitions, grassroots organizations, everyday people organizing against data centers. I think I finally had to stop at like 10 states. It got to be too much. It got to be overwhelming. And I want to focus more on what's happening right here at home and in my backyard. And so again, these zoning requests, no, I'm sorry, yes, zoning request for land is another clue that something is happening. You know, I talked to my people down in Fayetteville, where they have a 615-acre data center campus being built. One of the other myths that developers tell elected officials that they pass on to us are the amount of jobs that these things create. That is completely false. Not even in the construction phase. I've heard from some folks in Virginia, where the data center capital right now, that there are construction companies that are specializing in building data centers. It's a very specific kind of construction process. And there are people who specialize in that. So if people who come in, I tell them, people come to these city council meetings, if you think you're going to get a $13 or $18 an hour job from the data centers, guess again, my friend. Guess again. It's not a warehouse. They're not just going to put up some walls, do some wiring, create a parking lot, cut down a bunch of trees. It's not that simple. And I would also I have a reference point when I talk about jobs, an article that came out in 2024 on Fox5Atlanta's.com, where Elon Musk got a $10 million tax break, Lord have mercy, for an existing data center. And in that article, it says, while no new jobs will be created, comma, this tax break does save the 24 existing jobs at the data center. Yes, you heard me, 24. 24 jobs, nowhere near the hundreds of jobs that they are telling us are coming. And from what I understand, the people who work in the data centers, they're server babysitters. That's it. It doesn't even require a whole lot of skill. They just need to push a button or call somebody when something goes wrong. So that is another one of the myths. So you think about all the things, and where am I on time? I think I'm at time. All of the things that we have been told, all of the things that our elected officials choose to believe, but as the people who put them into office, it is incumbent upon us to bring the truth, let it live in light, give it to them all the time, every day, every meeting, whenever you have a chance. I saw a city council member at the grocery store last week, 15 minutes bending her ear. So these are the fights that we are in. They are winnable, but we have to make sure we get organized and we come with a whole squad when we show up at these meetings.
All right. Thank you, Wanda, and thank you to each of our panelists. We've had a number of questions stream in. And so I'll begin with the first one. We've got a question about that says, what about SARA Title III and the toxic release inventory? Just so people know, this is referencing a federal law requiring facilities that handle hazardous and toxic chemicals to report them to government agencies and to the public. And so would someone want to handle that? If is that playing into this, what should people know about that?
Yeah, well, in the toxic release inventory, also specifically refers to the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act, I think of 1984. And this basically requires emitters to let communities know, what's going to happen. I mean, I think what we're seeing with environmental regulations right now, it really just depends on how the courts articulate them, right, and how the courts interpret them. So, I mean, it's not that they can't be used, right? The act that Brother Brooks just referred to is also the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, also known as the Cradle to Grave Law. And so, I mean, I don't think data centers would have a problem with a judge saying, okay, just tell people like, how much crap you're handling, where you're transporting, storing, and disposing of it, right? But you can still operate. So I think that while that definitely could be a tool for popular education, I'm not sure with the courts that are in operating right now would necessarily be a stopgap for us. And I'll shut up 1 second here. I like to say we don't live in a nation of laws, we live in a nation of loopholes.
Right.
Yeah, and
What-
I would just say like the current, like the ecosystem of data centers. The only thing that will be generated outside of like the gray water, that runs through the cooling systems will be like whatever electronic waste, like as like components fried. And like there isn't really any like broad spread like federal regulation around electronic waste. Like there may be some stuff at your municipal level, but there isn't like any federal regulation around that.
So just to go back real quick on the water issue, in particular, Naira, you live in Flint. I mean, you do work around Flint. We already know about Flint's history. You made mention of that water's useless. Uh, can you say more about the whole useless water? But before you say that, let me also go in, and Anthony can shake his head in agreement with me. We've been here in Ethiopia attending the African Climate Summit, they just opened a dam on the Nile River, which is the largest one in Africa now. And a third of that is going to be used to power AI. And here's what's amazing about it. Not only is that water going to be rendered useless, but also almost half of Africa doesn't have electricity, but they want to dedicate a huge amount of their natural resources to power AI. It's ridiculous, but say more about the whole useless water issue for us, if you will. And anybody else that want to jump in after, feel free.
Well, yeah, I'll take a stab at it. And when I say like the water is useless, you know, like so there is like the directly for the data centers. So that's the actual water, and for the most part is like coming from folks drinking water, municipal drinking water systems. Like this isn't like pumped from a well because it has to be treated. Just because of like I don't want to get all into like cooling, like the whole HVAC thing, but it has to be specific type of water with like no like hard minerals, so it has to be treated. So it's coming from people's drinking water, and you know, like actually going through like little hoses to actually cooling it. So that is like that water right there, and then there is the water that is used like for dirty fossil fuels. So like all of that water can't just like immediately go to like your wastewater treatment plant. Sometimes like that has to be stored, like depending on like the like what is that is being used to generate. And so that's what I'm saying, like it's useless. Like it just can't be like it's basically pushing more contamination, like if it's trying to be discharged into surface water. And so that's why, like, when I'm saying like it's useless, it's not like I could just like take that water and be like, okay, I'm gonna drink it. I'm going to garden, like I'm going to use it like for compost. And so like that's like what I mean when I say it's useless.
You just talked about these lines that are that this water is going through, but one of the things we hadn't mentioned just yet on this call are the pipelines that also go along with these data centers, and the pipelines that go along with these data centers are running under your house right now. I want to make that very clear. Can anybody talk about these pipelines and what actually is in these pipelines? Because here's what I'm trying to do, y'all, especially my UCC folk. I'm trying to scare the hell out y'all right now. And the reason I'm trying to scare you is because you have an opportunity to use your voice to speak to your congregations so that your congregations can use their voice to speak to their city council to say, we don't want this. We don't want this in our neighborhoods. We don't want this in our communities. But even more than that, those who we fight to protect, we don't want it affecting them either. Can somebody talk about these pipelines and what's actually contained in these pipelines? Possibly who's behind some of these pipelines so we'll know who to point the finger at. Don't nobody want to take that? Y'all all mom's word right now.
Which one was that? That one more time? I'm sorry, it was a little loud out here. It's Ethiopian New Year's, y'all, and it's loud. Sorry.
Like I already told him, Anthony. Brooks asked me had I experienced it yet. I said, no, I got to do the Lord's work before I get into the devil's business. So let's go and finish this call so we can go see what this Ethiopia is about. But I was asking about the pipelines that are running, fueling these data centers. What is contained in these pipelines? And possibly who's behind some of these pipelines so that we'll know who to point the finger at.
Well, yeah, real quick. I mean, there's going to be two kinds of pipelines. There's going to be the fossil fuel pipelines to, feed their energy. Massive transmission lines for the ones that do use renewable energy. And then our favorite carbon dioxide pipelines, because they're going to say, oh, we're going to reduce our emissions by installing carbon capture and sequestration, which we all know should be called carbon catch and release. yeah, I mean, I think that if you live in the South, the first people to hold accountable, y'all are blessed, and this is something that needs to be used more. You get to vote for your public service commissioners, who are the ones who will have to approve all of those pipelines. Please vote for your public service commissioners. Go out and vote for your public service commissioners. But in northern states, you know, the enlightened blue states, governors pick those public service commissioners. So hold your governors accountable. But it'll be the same. You know, that's the other thing about data centers and big tech. They have formed a behemoth in their merger with big oil, right? And big fossil fuels. So those are who we have to hold accountable. But whoever is approving those permits is really who we have to watch out for. Unfortunately, many of these data center projects are not federally mandated, so they are not subject to the National Environmental Policy Act, and we are at the mercy of our state environmental policies, or as we like to say in Nebraska, we don't have state environmental policies, so we're just at the mercy of the state. But real quick, Rev, if I will, because we were talking about power building, Miss Wanda and Sister Lindsay. Now is the time to form allyships and coalitions with people who you would think are not, you know, people who we would form allyship with. Farmers and rural folk, they don't want any of this stuff. And Black people live in rural communities too, just FYI. And Black people are farmers too, FYI. But they don't want this and whatnot. So form coalitions with them. I would also say homeowners, right, who don't want their prices to go up and not be able to turn on their water. Certainly our blessed indigenous comrades who it's their land. They don't want to see anything worse happen to it. But that's who I would say is, like, you know, are more natural allies than people like to say, you know, unlikely allies. Remember, it was a coalition of a lot of people that eventually stopped the Keystone XL pipeline, and I think that we can bring back a renaissance of those coalitions. We need to do that anyway for the larger climate fight. Hey, Joan, what part of Nebraska are you from? And
All right.
Uh,
Thank you for those responses. Go ahead. Someone else is going to jump in.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like luckily, like the data center 10-year moratorium or regulation was stripped from the federal budget. These are going to be lost, lost at the local level. Unfortunately, it's like some of our elected officials, like they think that this is going to open the door. They're going to get a golden gilded invitation to Mark Zuckerberg's next party, and that's not going to happen. Um, I would say, like, as far as organizing and fighting back, like you looking at the state and seeing if you do have any preemption laws on the books. A lot of this stuff is happening like through economic development. So like looking at like your state economic development councils, talking to your local chamber of commerce, because they are the ones that are packaging this and like courting those at the site, like those sites, looking and see if you have like any type of regional planning alliances and like inserting like your stuff there. One of the things that like also happens with development too, of trying to buy off communities, these community benefit agreements that may or may not go through like your municipality, and you just got to tell people like just say no to that stuff. Also asking for any type of public transparency laws around data centers or just in general, because that is something. And Rev and Anthony, you're talking about homeowners. This is also a loss of generational wealth, and especially like with Black people, like our generational wealth is tied specifically to home ownership and not like through capital gains. So this is also something to be looking at. Check.
Great. Thank you so much for those responses. We had some questions come in about wanting to know more about how to opt out of AI searches. And so we have an explainer video Michael has shared. We'll put that in the chat that gives an explanation for how to do the AI opt-out process. I think a final question I'll throw out there before we wrap up is AI greenwashing something that we need to be aware of and think about? I saw recently, I think it was Google, came out with a report about uh, how good they're doing reducing their energy use, and they're becoming more and more efficient and reducing the amount of energy that is needed for AI. Is that a thing? Is that greenwashing or what's happening there?
Yeah,
It's like green. Oh, I just say it's green Chinese water torture, but that's all I'll say.
I must say my BS meter definitely shot up on that one. You can't have both. And again, I think it just goes back to this philosophy. I mean, if it were just about data, we wouldn't be here, right? There's like you can look at the data, but you can argue it either way that you want, the way that you want it to go. I mean, and so it's the same playbook the Southern Company is using, you know, saying they clean energy. It's the same playbook for small modular reactors. It's the same playbook for the other monopoly energy companies in this country. They're perpetuating the climate crisis while fighting the climate crisis at the same time. And they have a lot of money to basically be able to ride both of those rails and then continue doing the same things that are making us be in a worse place in the first place. So long story short, that's bogus. I say no.
Right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's just as green as natural gas, Brooks.
All right. All right. Good to have the record set straight. Thank you. Michael, any final questions you want to put out to the before we wrap things up?
You know, I would ask, I know we've heard ways of getting involved, but I would like for each one of you all just to real quick, I mean, very quickly, are there ways to get involved? Anything that we can plug in? And I'll start with Anthony since he's at the top, and then Lindsay, Naira, and Wanda.
Yeah, just real quickly, you know, it's nascent in Nebraska. I saw a comrade in there from Lincoln. But yeah, I think it's just popular education, but paying attention to the fights that are already happening so that we can learn from each other, what worked, what didn't work. And I'll leave it to the people who are actually in the fights that are happening right now.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you said my name next. I totally agree with that. I think we need to think about what we're doing, you know, and kind of begin moving together versus just kind of doing willy-nilly and taking what is given to us. There will be a website coming out for the Minus AI campaign. There will be an official launch in a couple of weeks. So just please keep your eyes and ears open and watch the explainer video and opt out of AI.
Nair?
Sorry, I was typing. Trying to type an answer. Oh, I didn't hear the question. Could you repeat it?
I was asking for ways to get plugged in. Just if you have anything that you all are pushing or you know of that's being pushed, ways to get
Yeah.
involved.
Well, you could go to Flint Rising website if you want to, flintrising.com, the contact us tab. If you're from Michigan, we do already have kind of like a statewide guiding constellation, kind of working group around data centers. So you can chime in with that and you could just reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat so y'all can get linked in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wanda.
Yeah, real quick, I was trying to find this report that was just released from our friends at Media Justice. So I will share that, Brooks, so that you can share the information about this report in the South primarily. But yeah, I mean, it's old school grassroots organizing. That's what we need right now. Go to the city council, planning and zoning, county commission people, and the other people there who are mad, that's your tribe. Link up with your tribe. Find information in the toolkits, figure out a strategy on how you're going to stop it or pause it, whatever it takes. Also, in the data center toolkit, there are sample ordinances. I'm organizing, I think maybe cities in 5 different counties, pressing them to pass a 100-day moratorium on all data centers until a study committee can be put together so that we can get the real facts about what happens when we have these data centers in our communities. And then with all these people passing these resolutions, this moratorium, then that's when we go to the media. That's when we're going to start really ringing the bell really loud, saying all these people in all these cities and counties are saying pause 100 days because we don't even know what the heck is going on, because the only information we get at town halls are from the developers and the people who are going to make money off of the data centers. Do you think they're going to tell you the truth? The whole truth? Any of the truth? Absolutely not if it means money coming out of their pockets. Check.
Thank you. Listen, I hope that you all have heard us, but be on the lookout so that you can get involved. We believe that if we can get 12 million people to opt out of using AI for their data searches, we can really make a dent in this whole surge for data centers and therefore curb what's happening with AI right now. So we look forward to you being involved. Look out for the People's Justice Council email and make sure that you all get involved. Thank you, Brooks.
All right. Thank you to each of our panelists. I tell you, I've been in meeting after meeting, and I get emails, I think, on a weekly basis where people are saying, what should we be doing? What can we do about AI data centers? So this is really the issue that's been coming to the top the most recently, and you all have given us a terrific resource. I mean, this webinar video will live on as a great resource for our churches and faith communities to go to, so that we know what to do and what we can do. And so, with lots of gratitude, we end this webinar today. We look forward to being back a month from now with our next Creation Justice webinar. Thank you, everyone, and take care and God bless.